Our 71st inductee is Dave Ewing. Dave's the head wrestling coach at Ankeny High School.
We will. You done with it?
Thank you. Jim gave me permission to say my speech should be a little shorter. As it should be. I'd like to recognize my wife and friend for life. She accompanied me up here. Appreciate her coming along, and she helped me write this. Hopefully I can read your writing, Diana. It's really an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be part of this event this evening. And I was really honored when Joe Gibbons called me and asked him to introduce him being inducted in the Hall of Fame, and extremely happy for him. He's very deserving of it. I'd just like to say a few words about our friendship. Our friendship spans about 20 to 25 years, and Joe's been there all the time for me, and I tried to be there all the time for him when we needed each other. I've coached at Ankeny for 16 years now, and there hasn't a year gone by where he hasn't made some appearances in the room to help out, and his time is very valuable, and I appreciate those efforts as well. I use Joe as an example a lot of times in my wrestling room, talking to my young athletes about how to achieve excellence and perfection, especially in technique. And what I can remember from Joe's technical skills, watching him wrestle, he executed his technique so perfectly, and I know this all came from hard work and dedication, but he'd execute his skills so perfectly it looked like he was doing it easily. And these guys were not slouches he was wrestling. Okay, it just was amazing, and that's what really had an impact on me to see him do that. I kind of transfer that into my wrestling room and try to help the kids that way and show them the importance of executing the perfect technique. I use Joe as an example. Through college, Joe was my training partner. He was my friend. He was my roommate. And he doesn't probably even know this, but he was my gauge. I think everybody has a gauge in life where they set themselves and try to figure out, this is what I got to do to achieve what I want to do. And Joe was my gauge. If he was lifting weights at 6 o'clock in the morning, I was lifting weights at 6 o'clock in the morning. And he didn't know it, but I was always trying to lift more than him, too. I was always trying to run further than him, trying to wrestle harder than him, and I tell you what, it was a great experience for me to just be part of his life. It was a brief time, but our friendship continues on. It's a friendly competition between us, and I think Joe refers to it as our days in Vietnam together. I think we used to beat the heck out of each other in the wrestling room and try to make each other better as well. You know, the wrestlers, I'm sure, can relate to that. Joe is the best man in our wedding, the godfather of both of our children. Take an honor in that as well. And my wife said, well, you're going to have to come up with a funny story, aren't you? We're going to go to sleep on you. And I was thinking, I just couldn't think of anything. And then one thing came to mind. But for this, I need Joe, as part of my story, he needs to stand up and be a prop. He doesn't even notice that. You have to stand up. Put your hands like this. Okay, you can sit down now. Just keep that image in your mind. I was on my recruiting trip to Iowa State. And, I knew Joe, but really had never run around with him or met him yet until we became friends and roommates. But we were out on the town one night in Ames, and it was not during the wrestling season. I'd like to let these young guys know that. We still trained year-round, but we were out on the streets having a good time, and I walked up and I see Joe standing like this, and I knew he was tough. I wasn't doubting that at all, but I was wondering about how intelligent he was, because the guy he was about to have a scrap with was from Fort Dodge, and that's my hometown, and they make it pretty tough there too. So I started wondering, I wonder how he's going to fare here. I won't even tell you what happened, but I think they did mix it up a little bit. That's only a funny story I can think about that comes to mind real quick, but that was like the first time Joe and I really hung out together, and that was a good impression that I had of him, because I enjoyed mixing it up too. So, a few times. A little bit about Joe the wrestler. And these are things that jotted down from memory, basically, and I'm sure there's more information that maybe I'm overlooking, but known him pretty well. 4-time state champion, 4-time high school freestyle state champion, 4-time high school Greco-Roman national champion, I should say, not state. Joe's the only 12-time state champion that I know of. Okay, and that speaks a lot right there. Federation Nationals, I mean, you're winning the weight class out of the 60, 80, 100 kids in your weight class. So, and he won 8 of those titles across the country. That was in high school. He was also voted the outstanding senior wrestler in his age category when he won his national title as a high school senior. Joe is a 4-time All-American at Iowa State and 1985 NCAA champion at 142 pounds. 2-time Big 8 champion and a 2-time Big 8 runner-up. And I mean, the records could go on and on. I think he probably set a lot of records at Iowa State that I'm not even going to remember or mention, but again, being a friend of his is an honor and a true honor to be up here speaking about him. Joe is the first true freshman to ever win the Midlands tournament in Illinois. Harold Nichols, last national champion at Iowa State University. The team captain at Iowa State University. And moving beyond wrestling, Joe did wrestle some international wrestling after he graduated. He worked on his master's degree and got that in business. And had an opportunity to wrestle on some world teams. And he did defeat the reigning world champion from the Soviet Union. Was a assistant coach to his brother Jim at Iowa State for 6 years. And still helps people in wrestling. Like I said, he comes to my room as often as he can. He gets around to the tournaments, the meets, and people know who he is, and his face will never be forgotten. Okay, Jim said let's move on. Currently, Joe owns a Culver's in Des Moines. He has a love for horses, owns a couple of horses, and the opportunity to visit him at Culver's is always open, I'm sure, right, Joe? Okay. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce my best friend, lifelong friend, and new inductee to the Hall of Fame, Joe Gibbons.
Well, if Grandpa and Grandma Frank were around, I'd be pissed off at them. Instead of sending Joe to Iowa State to go to teacher school, they should have sent him to auctioneer school. No, fun aside here, I couldn't be prouder of the two guys that I'm going into the Hall with tonight. Joe Frank had a big impact on my career. He's my godfather. His lovely wife Janet, my godmother, and we go way back. My brother Jim here, I'll talk a little bit more about him, but he set the tone. Bigger brother kind of, made the path for me, and I try to make it a little bit wider as I came through after him. I want to thank Dave Ewing and his wife Diana coming up here. They're my best friends, and like, JR, I call them. I was the best man at their wedding, godfather of their kids. They've been a big part of my life as I move on into my life after wrestling career. We go way back. We were All-Americans with Coach Harold Nichols that last year. There was a lot of excitement. A lot of things were going on at that time. It was an exciting time. We were roommates. And now that Coach Ewing has got his own program in Ankeny, I want to congratulate him because this year he crowned 2 of his first state champions. To do one of that year is a big accomplishment, but he has 2 first state champions, and one of them was his nephew, Toby, who completed his senior year and went undefeated. And there can't be a better feeling than to be a coach down at Veterans Auditorium on Saturday night, putting the gold medal around, your wrestlers, your men. And so I want to congratulate Coach Ewing on that. I'm very humbled to be here. I wasn't expecting to be here tonight. When I got the letter from Jerome Brushka and Chuck Curtis I thought we were talking just about Joe Frank, but you know, they're on the same line with my brother Jim and I, and so I'm really humble, I'm flattered. I feel like I'm ahead of my time here, and so I want to thank the Iowa Wrestling Hall of Fame, the board of directors. I want to thank the selection committee, and in looking at that selection committee, I know each and every one of those guys. I know how many state tournaments they've been to, how many national wrestling tournaments they've been to, and how many matches that they've witnessed of great Iowa wrestling, and to be selected by that group is very flattering. So I want to thank each and every one of you. You know, last night I was thinking about what to say here tonight, and when I look back, I look at the state of Iowa, and I'll tell you what, I lived in 4 towns in this state, and 4 towns only. In the first town, I was born in Waterloo, Blackhawk County. That's where my dad's from. The first 2 years of my life, while my dad was going to school, we kind of, all my brothers and I lived on my grandparents' farm up in Cresco. So I was in Cresco for 2 years, and that's where my mom's from. And then from 2 to 5, we moved down to Iowa City as my dad was finishing his college career and finishing up law school. So we spent the next 3 years in Iowa City. We know how rich in tradition Iowa City is. And then from there, we moved from Iowa City over to Ames. And we know all about Ames. And so, you know, looking back at my life, and Ames is what I consider my hometown, that I couldn't pick, you know, 4 communities, 4 towns that were such rich in wrestling tradition. And the list goes on. And so I was destined to wrestle. And when I was in coaching, I used to do a lot of camps around the country. And everybody go, why is Iowa so tough? And I really feel it's because of the families that we have in Iowa. When you'd go to tournaments when you were young, you couldn't believe all the family support there. Moms and dads, brothers and sisters. It was a total family effort. And that's no exception when it came to my family. And I really give all my credit to my family growing up. And the people I want to mention first are my grandparents. Raymond and Marie Frank from Cresco, Iowa here, and Lawrence and Adeline Gibbons of Waterloo. You know, when I look back, you know, the years that I was around all of them, you know, you couldn't find 4 more spiritual, honest, hardworking people. They didn't have a whole lot, but what they had was important. Their family meant everything to them. And what gave my brothers and I great satisfaction was to be wrestling at tournaments, and they would always be there supporting us, whether it was the state tournament or national tournament. And it was always fun to see how proud it made them feel. Because we always seem to have socials and get-togethers afterwards. And it made my brothers and I very, very happy to make them proud, because we were very proud of them. So, and second of all, I want to talk about my mom and dad. And it all started, the wrestling in my life, it started with my dad. He's the one that gave me the direction. And in order to do great things growing up, you need to have direction. A lot of young people today don't have that direction. As I look at the young people here tonight, I got that direction at an extremely young age of 8 years old. And so my dad was there, gave me the direction. He taught me how to set goals at a young age. And he spent a lot of time, energy, and the family resources to haul me and my brothers around the state of Iowa as well as around the country to get competition, to get good. Because let's face it, if I was 6'2", I'd be in the NFL on Sunday playing football, and I'm not 6'2". But so my size dictated a little bit of that, and my dad gave me a lot of direction there. Second of all, you know, or not second of all, but just as important was my mom, and she was always there for us. She created a great home environment to train in, to live in, you know, the diet, to get the right rest. And she was always there for me, sitting in the stands. I didn't win every match, and when I lost, she didn't pamper me. She always supported me. She stayed positive. And in the sport of wrestling, you got to have perseverance and patience. You got to be able to work hard, and that's what my mom taught me, and it was just as important. And so when I started wrestling, you know, it was a great time to be living in Ames, Iowa. It was back in the late 60s and late 70s, and the legendary coach Harold Nichols was running off a string of national championships. A lot of his great wrestlers are here tonight. Tom Peckham, Gordon Haskell, and there are several others. Les Anderson back there was his great assistant. let me tell you about Les Anderson. I mean, he was the key there. I really connected with Les. There isn't a person in this room that knows as much wrestling as Les Anderson. And I knew him from when I was young. I remember when Coach Nichols, we bought a wrestling mat. We lived in Ames, and Coach Nichols brought out, Les was there, and I believe Dave Martin and Dan Gable, because Gable was just finishing up his career up there in Ames. They helped put that wrestling mat in our basement. And so I've had a relationship with a lot of these coaches ever since I first started, stepping on the mat. And when I look back, I grew up in a family of 4 boys. There was Jim, Tim, and I was number 3, and then younger brother Jeff over here. It wasn't all fun. Even though it's an exciting time to live in Ames, it wasn't all fun because there seemed to be this period of time when I started out wrestling that I spent most of my nights crying, and I can tell you why. I had 2 uncles, and Joe Frank's one of them here. He was a state champ, wrestled at Iowa State, and was a coach in high school. And then I got my Uncle Omer, who lived down there in Missouri. He was a state champ and coached down at Central Missouri State. But you got these 2 uncles that one lived in Minnesota, one lived in Missouri, and we lived right in Iowa. And when they would go visit each other, they would stop in Ames and spend the night at our house. Well, in order to eat, we usually had to go work out. That was kind of my dad's rule. So he would have my uncles down in the basement picking their brain. I mean, these guys got coached by 2 of the best, Chris Flanagan and Coach Harold Nichols. So we'd be down in the basement at a young age on a wrestling mat, going over techniques. We learned the Fridley ride from Joe Frank. It's still to this day the move that I pinned the most wrestlers in growing up, and I learned it from Coach here. But they'd have us down in the basement. And then after technique, you got to know my dad that he taught us how to be competitive at a young age, in a good way. And I have 2 older brothers. They're 1 year apart. They're basically the same size. So on any given night, one could beat the other. So on one night, Jim beats Tim. Tim's upset, crying upstairs. Next night, Tim beats Jim. Jim's upset. There's probably some tears. These guys are not stupid, so it didn't take them long to figure out that, if you're going to go to a fight, you don't want to go into a fight that you're going to, 50-50 chance of winning. So they looked down the pecking order, and I was the 3rd son. A lot smaller, not as strong, and I got beat up a lot, and I cried. I spent a lot of my younger days crying. That's how I remember it. All right? So, now I always knew Dad was tough, but here's when I found out Mom was tough. You don't pick on the baby, all right? So I went after Jeff. Jeff let out a scream, then Mom's after me. And the only other time Mom got after me is when I was misbehaving in church. So I learned at a young age that, I got to be tough quick. All right, now I look back, and I kind of claim this because I got 4 titles. Jim had 3, Jeff had 2, Tim had 1. I go, if you guys would have let me beat up Jeff when he was little, he'd have been a 4-time state champion. We would have 12 in the family, 2 more. All right, but that wasn't going to happen. Another thing, at the end of the day, I thought that to better my wrestling career, I needed to get bigger and stronger. And I just had a little story here. I see some relatives here in the crowd, and you just remind me growing up that, and here being in Cresco, that I had a lot of great memories here as a young kid. And I remember when I was about 10 years old, Jim and I came up to Cresco for 2 weeks. And Grandma had passed on, but Grandma Frank lived in town, and she had this oversized lot, had this huge garden. And so Jim and I came up there, and if you know Grandma Frank, boys to her means get to work. She always had something to do for us. Boys were meant to work. So we had this huge garden. We're weeding it, we're mowing it, we're doing whatever she wants us to do, and we're mowing the yard. And we did all that in the first week. And then in the second week, we got lucky because when you came to Cresco, it meant you had the opportunity to go to a farm. Whether it was the Bergen farm, where Janet Bergen's from, their farm, where they had horses, or you had a chance to go to Omer's wife Shirley's farm, which was the Stevensons, where they had milk cows and a mean old rooster. They used to chase me around. But I got a chance to go there with Jim, and we spent the week with Chuck Stevenson here. I remember Chuck, we pitched a tent in the front yard, and we spent the week with him, and I followed him around like a little puppy dog. I just loved the farm. And I remember getting up in the morning, 6 o'clock, milking cows, and I was just impressed with Chuck, how strong he was. I mean, 40-gallon buckets of milk, and he's hauling them to the cooler, and we're out there feeding hogs, and he's grabbing bales of hay and throwing them like they're nothing. And I'm sitting there going, Chuck, you know, because I've been beat up by my brother. I need to get strong. I need to live on a farm. How do I do this? Well, I started talking to Chuck, and I go, you know, Chuck, you used to wrestle, didn't you? And he was in high school at the time, so he was wrestling at that time. And I go, Chuck, what was your record? And Chuck was modest, and I think he had a less than 500 record. And I go, what the heck's beating you? He goes, someone that knows how to wrestle. So I learned that being the strongest guy in the block isn't always the answer too, is that you got to learn some technique. And so I got my eyes open that week, spending some time with Chuck, because he's truly a great guy. I enjoyed the time with him, and a hard-working person. But you know, there was much more to it if you wanted to be successful in wrestling. The picture for me got really clear when I was 12 years old, and I'll tell you a quick story here. That's the time I set my first goal. I was in 6th grade, the age of these guys over here, and I remember it was at a time, and I remember it like it was yesterday. It was Jim. He's in his sophomore year up at Ames High, and he was down at the state tournament wrestling, and he got in the finals. He was wrestling a guy named Dan Glenn from Fairfield, who ended up being a couple-time All-American up in Iowa. And Jim had a tough match. They go in overtime. Jim wins the match on a unanimous decision. And I remember going back to our house and having a big party on our farm outside of Ames on E29. And grandparents are there, aunts and uncles, cousins are there, the coaches were there with their wives, and cheerleaders were there, and just all the hoopla and the attention was just a lot of fun that weekend to watch Jim win that state championship. And being competitive like I was 12 years old at the time. I remember going upstairs during the party and writing down on a piece of paper, Joe Gibbons, 4-time state champion at 12 years old. Now I put that above my bed. Now if you talk to Jim and Tim, they said, no, you brought it downstairs, you put it in front of the fireplace in front of everybody. I dispute that. But that was the time when I really got focused in wrestling, was at the age of 12. And you know, looking back over my career, I had a lot of great coaches. You know, it wasn't just my family, because I had a family of coaches. When you're around brothers, they're constantly coaching you. But I got the opportunity to move back to Waterloo my freshman, sophomore year and wrestle for Coach Dennis Getz and his assistant Gary Long. I remember my workout partners, Dan Majeski, Stuart Carter, Brian McCarville, guys that helped me get better. I owe a lot to Coach Getz. He taught me a lot of mental toughness, and it was a great time to live in Waterloo. I mean, the great Bob Sittons had just retired then, and he turned it over to Don Huff. We had great dual meets with West Waterloo. And I'll tell you what, looking back, some of my fondest memories was right there. That was the hotbed at that time. I remember as a freshman, being an underdog. First match of my career, I lose up in Charles City to a senior, go to the district tournament, lose to him again. And, you know, and I remember at Veterans Auditorium. You know, you guys gotta understand, my goal is to be a 4-time state champion. And I'm standing around at Veterans Auditorium, and I run into my dad down on Matt's side. He looks at me and goes, hey, you know what? There's not a person in Veterans Auditorium tonight that thinks you're going to win. But he goes, I expect you to win. All right? And it was what I needed to hear. Now, the Grand March takes place, and I'm sitting over in the bleachers next to Jim Lord, who's been in the finals 4 times. He's a senior. He's about ready to set the record for most points scored in a match, so he doesn't even warm up. And I got Jeff Kerber, who's a 4-time undefeated state champ, going for his 3rd title. And I remember Jim Lord elbowing me and going, how are you going to beat him tonight? I go, what? He goes, how are you going to beat Schultz tonight? He beat you twice. How are you going to beat him? And I'm thinking real hard, and Jeff Kerber picks up on it. So he throws an elbow over on my left side. He says, all you got to do is score more points than him. and you know what? Because I didn't know how I was going to beat him. He was bigger than me, you know, kind of stronger than me, more experienced than me, you know, but when he said that, I relaxed. I went out there and wrestled my match, and when the ref blew the final whistle, you know, I had more points than him, and I got my hand raised, and it was probably the most pivotal match, the most important match in my career was winning it as a freshman, because it set the tone from there on out. Now, I wrestled my sophomore year there, and Coach, you know, taught me how to be consistent. Had an undefeated career there at 105 pounds. But then my junior year, we moved back to Ames. And I got a chance to wrestle for Coach Jack Mendenhall, the late Jack Mendenhall. And that was our hometown. All my other brothers had won state championships for Jack Mendenhall. And so I got a chance to wrestle for him my junior year and senior year. His assistant coach were Keith Bailey and Bob Infocoven. They had a trainer, Ron Green, there who helped me out quite a bit. My junior year, I went up 3 weight classes, transferred. Matter of fact, earlier in the year, I got beat by my old workout partner from Waterloo, Columbus, Dan Majeski. So there was some adversity in making the move. It was a tough move. And Coach Mendenhall kept me focused on winning the championship. Ron Green kept me healthy because I tore a cartilage in my knee the day before the state tournament. And Dr. Bob Gitchell from Ames operated on me 2 days after the state tournament. Never had a problem since. But I have a lot of great memories wrestling for Coach Jack Mendenhall. My senior year, it got to be a lot easier when you're going for your 4th. Most people kind of try to avoid you. All the better guys went to other weight classes. So, but the night I won my 4th title and finally achieved my goal, you know, a lot of great memories, you know, but I will tell you this, that I probably got more excited when Jeff Kerber won it when I was a sophomore, Jeff was a senior. He was the first guy to do it in the modern era. We never saw Bob Stevens from Iowa win his 4th title from Red Iowa. But I sat there and that night, Jeff won it, and it was truly amazing to watch a wrestler get a standing ovation for the first time. And I knew Jeff very well. He's the first career loss that I ever had as a kid. And you always remember that. We were great friends. Remember, you know, hanging out with his dad, my dad, going to tournaments all around the country. But I remember that night. Yeah, my 4th title was an important night, but probably more so is that Jack Mendenhall received the Coach of the Year honor in 1981. And that was a big night for him. He had coached a lot of state champions. He had never won a state championship team trophy, but he coached a lot of state champions. And Coach Mendenhall is no longer with us. He passed away a couple of years ago. But I do remember this. I went to go visit him the day before he passed away. He was in the hospice. And I remember walking in the room, and he looked over at me, and his eyes kind of lit up, and we had a lot of great memories there. You know, no one had to say anything. And I shook his hand, and I looked on his left hand. He had his wedding ring, and I looked on his right hand. He had the ring that the Iowa High School Athletic Association gave him for Coach of the Year. It meant that much to him that he wore it till the end. He sat in the corner of 8 of our 10 state championships. Our family was very, very grateful to Coach Mendenhall. He created the environment that enabled us to all succeed and excel and achieve our goals. And so those are my nice memories of Coach Mendenhall. Quickly, I will say this. Summer freestyle was important, guys. And that was a chance for me to kind of cross-train, get around some other state championship wrestlers like Jeff Kerber, Greg Randall, Jim Lord, Scott Morningstar. Those are the guys I hung out with in the summer. We all had the same goal. We rubbed off on each other. That gave me a chance to get around coaches at the freestyle tournaments who were volunteering their time at the time. Was coaches like Bob Darrah from Downlink, who's in the Hall of Fame here, Tim Johnson from Mount Vernon, Brad Smith from Lisbon, Nick Pickford from Fort Madison. I have great memories of all those coaches. They've taught me a lot, and it helped me achieve my goals of being a national champ and a 4-time state champ. When it came to college, I went to Iowa State, and there was only 2 choices at the time. It was either wrestle for Coach Gable, who was here earlier tonight, or Coach Nichols. And it was a tough choice because Ames was my hometown. I knew a lot of wrestlers from both programs, but Jim had won the national title that year at Iowa State, along with Nate Carr, and it just felt right. So I chose Iowa State. Didn't look back. A lot of great memories, and a lot of great teammates here, like Eric Volker, Coach Ewing here. And so I felt like I made the right choice. And like I said, I was surrounded by great coaches. Les Anderson at the top of the totem pole there. Charlie and Willie Gadsden. Chris Campbell and Ed Bannigan came over from Iowa to help us out. Randy Nielsen from Algona, Mike Lamb from Valley West Des Moines, Nate Carr. I remember my workout partners, and these guys are important because every day we battle. Dave Ewing right here. Randy Conrad from Illinois. Danny Wade sitting in the crowd here from Presto. Tim Krieger from Mason City. Mike Carr from the great Carr family. Stuart Carter, who was a teammate of mine at Waterloo, Columbus, became a national champion at Iowa State University. And my brothers, Jim and Jeff. In my coaching, I want to tell you this real quick, is that I really enjoyed that probably more than anything. I got a chance to coach for 6 years with Jim up at Iowa State. I enjoyed working out, training, recruiting the athletes to come to Iowa State to win the championship that we did in 1987. There ain't a better feeling. I'm telling you that here tonight. You know, Jim and I went down to Kansas City and watched the national tournament. You kind of feel a little bit low right now. But Iowa State is a strong program. It should be there in the top, if not winning it. When I look back, you know, it was great to win a national championship at Iowa State. But it was greater to coach someone to win a national championship at Iowa State. And I know Jim and I, we missed that. We're away from it now. And we hope that things can rebound. And finally, the sport of wrestling has been great to me. It afforded me an education at Iowa State. I got 2 degrees, bachelor's and a master's. I'm very proud of. I was able to wrestle under 2 great coaches, Coach Harold Nichols, Coach Jim Gibbons, 2 coaches who have coached national championship teams, which is very rare. It gave me the ability to travel around the country and around the world to see things that I never would have saw. But when I look back, it was truly the friendships that I had from the wrestlers that I either competed with or trained with, the coaches that I had met, and the families that I met along the way. That's what was dearest to me. So I want to thank you again tonight. It's been a great evening. I'm overwhelmed by the people that showed up, all my family members on both sides of the fence.